And here we are back again, and we've done something really interesting, different than what we've had the rest of the morning. It's Obie, our Silverwood, and he's an author. He brought his new book in. Hi, Obie.
Carol, thanks for having me on.
Oh, we're so really happy to have you
Let
here.
me just show you the book for a minute. It's called 007 Obie. And to acquire the book, you would go to the website www.007obie.com. The book is about living an image. You would think it's about James Bond, and it is in many respects, but it's about living an image. I was born in 1944 in Los Angeles, and growing up, the movies had an influence on me. Movies like Topper with Cary Grant.
Oh, I love those.
Yes, and Laurel and Hardy comedies, Charlie Chan movies. All the gentlemen wore suits. The ladies wore dresses and furs and jewels.
And hats.
And there were lots of cocktail parties, black-tied cocktail parties. And then as a teenager, James Bond came along. As a teenager, for me, that is, James Bond came along. And, I watched him dashing around the world in a tuxedo and skiing the Swiss Alps, driving an Aston Martin. And it kind of gave me a further image of what I thought a gentleman should be. And then I read books and learned about Ernest Hemingway and the sportsman, the adventurer, the writer, and his cavorting around with F. Scott Fitzgerald and Picasso on the Riviera and in Paris and in St. Moritz.
Yeah.
And that added further to what my image, what I thought a gentleman should be. And what this book is, it's a reflection of me living the life to fulfill that image. And there was a learning curve. It wasn't always because being born and raised in Southern California, that's a different approach to being a gentleman. But let me just go here to the introduction for a second, because it's kind of cute on, as I say, the learning curve. I say here, it reminds me now of Casino Royale, the scene in which James Bond and Vesper Lynd were dining alone at the Hotel Splendide. That's from the movie Casino Royale. My wife's lovely blue eyes sparkled with light from the crystal chandeliers. Joy and I were in St. Moritz to ski and seated that evening at a quiet table in the Palace Hotel's dining room. Fingering my lapel, I glanced up at the waiter, smiled, and uttered, "Bond, James Bond." He straightened a bit, raised his eyebrows, and looked down his long French nose and said, "Yes, monsieur, but white dinner jackets are worn only in the summer." So needless to say, I spent the rest of the evening peeking out of my shoelaces. Such were the lessons to be learned by a California guy wishing to be Bond. So as I said, there was a learning curve too.
Yeah.
The book has 33 chapters, and far too much to cover now, but I want to touch upon just one or two. Chapter 3 in the book is called License to Thrill. And my wife and I occasionally will rent a home in Carmel for the summer to escape the heat. And one such summer, we had guests staying with us, and they wanted to go to the races in Laguna Seca, the historical car races.
Oh.
I had no interest in going. It just wasn't my thing. But my wife said, "Well, they're guests. Let's do it." So I wasn't there any more than 15 minutes. And watching these Ferraris and Lamborghinis and Aston Martins go by, and the hair came up in my arms, and I said, I have to have one of those. And so I spent the next 3 or 4 months trying to decide which car to get. And being a Bond fan, I've always been a James Bond fan, I had to get an Aston Martin. And so that was the license plate of my Aston Martin, which is the title of the book, 007 Obie. So that's where that worked in.
That is so cute.
Another chapter, chapter 9, is called Ouch. Joy, my wife of 43 years, is my Bond girl and my Bond adventure enabler. She goes right along with me on these things, and she suggests literally we travel around the world to wherever Bond movies were filmed, and we try to live and do what Bond did. So on this particular trip, we were in Switzerland, in St. Moritz, and I saw the Olympic bobsled run. And I said to her, let's do that. She goes, no. I said, no, come on, let's do it. So I hired a Swiss pilot, they call it, the front man, and a Swiss brakeman, the back man, and we took the center two taxi position, and boom, and we took off the mile run down the Olympic run. And it was a thrill. It gives me goosebumps, as you can see. It was a thrill, but when we got to the bottom, my wife said, I'm in pain. And I said, what's wrong? She said, my back. And I said, well, you're okay. You probably just strained a muscle. Well, the next morning, her back was lumped red in the middle, and we had to go to the hospital. She had sheared a tenth of an inch off one of her vertebrae because of the centrifugal force of the bobsled had thrust her head in between her knees and bent her back so bad. So that was one of the that's why we entitled that chapter, Ouch.
Yeah, that's not the greatest thing.
Another chapter 17 is called Gilly Required. And Joy said to me one day, well, we've got to go to the K Club, the Kildare Club in Ireland. I said, why? And she said, well, Roger Moore, Sean Connery, and Pierce Brosnan, well, actually, Pierce Brosnan and Sean Connery, who both played James Bond, frequent the Kildare Club. It's a great golf course estate. The Ryder Cup has been held there regularly. And so I said, okay. So we made reservations and we went there. And I don't play golf. And there's 3 golf courses, and they all have lakes, and there's the river Effie goes through them. But I always take my trout gear when we travel. I'm a trout fisherman. I love fishing. And so I came down in the morning, and I said to the front desk, where should I go to fish? Where's the best spot? And they said, oh, you don't just fish here. He said, you need a gilly. And I said, there's a gilly required. I said, gilly. Well, a gilly shows up in the afternoon, this gentleman with a tweed cap and leathered face, weathered face, and a field coat and high boots. And he says, yes, I got the trout rod for you, the fly fishing. We only fly fish here, catch and release. So you had to have your own personal guide, and he put me in a golf cart and took me through to the courses, to the various lakes, and we always, every cast caught a trout. So we needed the gilly required for that one. Let me see if there's another comment on that. Oh, another interesting part on that was I knew that we were going over to Scotland after Ireland, and I wanted to fish Scotland. So I sent a letter about a month before we went on this trip to Prince Charles, telling him I'd be there, and I said, can we wet a line together on Balmoral if you're going to be there, and fish your river there. And I got a very nice letter back. It's in the book. You can see the letter from Prince Charles telling me that he was sorry he wouldn't be able to make it, but he'd wish me good luck, and that was kind of cute,
Oh, that was neat.
Okay, moving along. This one, chapter 23, Where's First Class? Again, growing up as a child, I watched these movies, old movies, and transatlantic cruises were the thing. And you had people like the Astors and the Vanderbilts, white tie, jewels dripping. It was wonderful. And so one of the James Bond's adventures, many of the James Bond movies were filmed in the Caribbean, in the Bahamas. And so we had to do a cruise down there to kind of go to the different islets in Nassau and experience it. And so Joy and I are expecting to see Jules and the Astors, and and what we found was the first 2,000 people through the gate at Disneyland on a Sunday morning.
Oh no!
that's who was on the boat. And it was a shock. So that's why I say, where's first class? I think it had disappeared.
Well, this is so funny. Just think of all the stories in this book that are all over the country.
They are all over the world.
And it's really exciting. And then I think you just better go and get it. And where are they going to go and get it?
They get it at, actually, it has to be ordered online, as I said, at www.007007obie.com. And, it's $15. You pay through with PayPal or a credit card, and it's shipped to you. But that's the most convenient place to get it. Can I tell one more story here?
Okay.
Okay. A local story. There are a couple local stories here. John Harris, you know the Harris Ranch?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he lives relatively close to me, and I said to him, you have your own private landing strip. I said, would you mind if I arranged a special car competition there? And he said, no, go ahead. So I had my Aston Martin, 3 other Aston Martin friends, 2 Corvettes, a Viper, and a Cobra race car. And we set up cones, and we did slalom runs, and we did sprint runs. And it was a thrill, an absolute thrill. That chapter was titled Almost Snake Bit, because the Viper went out of control, and I dodged it at the last second. It almost hit me. But at the end of the day, Harris stopped by, and he looked at the landing strip, and he said, geez, I hope people don't think those skid marks are from me landing my plane. Anyway, those are my comments. You know, it's a fun read. All kinds of interesting stories. New Year's Eve at the Paris Ritz. So many different things. It's just a fun read, and every chapter is tied into James Bond in some kind of way. What movie was filmed there, and information behind the movies.
Now, what happened to turn you on to 007?
Well, as I said, when I was, let's see, I would say about 16 years old, the movie Dr. No, the first James Bond movie, came out, and I think every teenager saw him, you know, doing the type things, even though he is only a imaginary civil servant, but doing the things he did, the tuxedo, the girls, the guns, the cars, all over the world, and living the good life, champagne, you name it. You know, it was. Oh,
I'm so happy for you, and your wife must have a really wonderful life.
We do.
And people, get this book and read it and have a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Don't forget to come back again.
Okay, thank you so much for having me on.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.